president on the stage, as he did yesterday, very hopeful about a drug that's used for malaria being brought into the market to help people who are dealing with the coronavirus. Here's the president's take, followed here by his top infectious disease doctor, Anthony Fauci.
Is there any evidence to suggest that, as with malaria, it might be used as a prophylaxis against COVID-19?
No, the answer is no, and the evidence that you're talking about, John, is anecdotal evidence. The information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it.
We all understand what the doctor said is 100% correct. It's early, but I've seen things that are impressive, and we'll see. We're going to know soon.
I want to start our conversation. A number of great experts standing by with our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, the president went on to say, I'm more of a fan of that than Dr. Fauci. He says, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Let's give it a try. What have you got to lose? That was one of several. Essentially, Tony Fauci was trying to be polite, trying to be deferential to the president, but essentially, if you listen to him closely, saying, I very much disagree. This is not immediate. This is not a game changer. This is not tomorrow. If it works, it is months away.
Never seen anything like it, John. I mean, it was incredible to see this back and forth. First, the president said this drug was approved for coronavirus yesterday. It is not. He said that there's a lot of evidence to show how promising it is. There is a 120-person study out of France that Dr. Tony Fauci described as anecdotal. The president said he feels good about it, and Dr. Fauci said, we have to do the studies, which is exactly what the FDA commissioner said yesterday as well. It just was a remarkable sort of back and forth between someone who's using their gut instincts, not scientifically based, not evidence-based, against, a venerable scientist who kept sort of on the fly, it seems, trying to fact-check the president. I just had never seen anything like it. I think Tony Fauci probably has one of the hardest jobs in America right now.
Sanjay, stay with us. I want to bring into the conversation.
Hell. Biblical. I kid you not. People come in, they get intubated, they die, the cycle repeats.
You overwhelmed?
Yeah, the system's overwhelmed all over the place. My daughter's an intern in Brooklyn, first-year resident. She starts the ICU today. I couldn't sleep last night. It's scary.
Right now it's every day, it's non-stop literally, and unfortunately it might get to a situation you have to pick and choose what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do. And as the doctor said, a lot of people come, they not really survive, they expire, and you put the same machine on another person, and you cannot really even cope with the situation because it's so hard to think about this. And we try to do our best. The only
So always, and that's what this slide is labeled, is goals of community mitigation. Really highlighting that this begins in the middle and the end with community. It is community and the community of the American people that are going to have to do the things for the next 30 days to make a difference. I think you know from that large blue mountain that you can see behind me, and I just want to thank the 5 or 6 international and domestic modelers from Harvard, from Columbia, from Northeastern, from Imperial, who helped us tremendously. It was their models that created the ability to see what these mitigations could do, how steeply they could depress the curve from that giant blue mountain down to that more stippled area. In their estimates, they had between 1.5 million and 2.2 million people in the United States succumbing to this virus without mitigation. Yet through their detailed studies and showing us what social distancing would do, what would happen if people stayed home, what would happen if people were careful every day to wash their hands and worry about touching their faces, that what an extraordinary thing this could be if every American followed these. And it takes us to that stippled mountain that's much lower, a hill actually, down to 100 to 200,000 deaths, which is still way too much.
The president started with that, but obviously very important. Brought in one team, then brought in his pandemic team. Meanwhile, let's bring in a member of our A team. Dr. Mehmet Oz joins us. The Dr. Oz Show back in taping, covering some very important topics. And Dr. Oz, first off, what could you tell us? I read in the New York Times today, they wrote the story. We heard about your show yesterday. Hydroxychloroquine. We had great hope for this a week ago. Then we didn't hear much of it. What can you tell us about this now?
Well, there is an important randomized study, it's still unpublished, from Wuhan, China. Dr. Ian Lipkin joins me on the show. He's the famous virus hunter. We've spoken to the medical leadership of China. We've vetted the study. We think it's real. Here's what they showed. 62 patients randomized. Half of them get the traditional therapy they're offering in China. Half of them get traditional therapy, plus they added hydroxychloroquine, the medication, the malaria drug we've been talking about. And here are their results. We have a full screen. We can put it up so everyone can look at this and digest it. In terms of symptoms, their temperature, their fevers broke instead of 3 days, which is the norm over there on this treatment, they got 2 days, which is cutting a 50% reduction. In terms of coughing, the other big symptom you have, again, it takes a little over 3 days oftentimes for that to go away, and that was dropped to 2 days. Those symptoms also correlate with infectivity. So the fact that they were dropping the amount of time they have those symptoms may also reflect the reduction of infectivity, but they didn't measure that. And here's the part that really caught my attention. They did CT scans of the chest in all the patients. All the patients had pneumonia when they started. Over the course of the 5-day treatment with the hydroxychloroquine, in 55% of the control population where they just got the normal therapy, there was some resolve and resolution of the pneumonia. In 81% of the patients on the hydroxychloroquine, there was improvement in the lungs images. In addition, and that was all those, by the way, everything I've said is statistically significant, even at 62 patients. Despite being small, they still got the measures that we like to see in medicine. Now, we need a bigger clinical trial. This is an early effort to try to show a lot of people whether this is the right way to go or the wrong way to go. I should point out that in the 31 patients that were the control group, 4 patients had bad outcomes. They got significantly worse. None of the patients in the hydroxychloroquine group got significantly worse. So the Chinese are using this as part of their routine treatment. They have a national protocol for measuring COVID-19. I think we ought to consider something like that in this country, but at least physicians and patients should be able to discuss this a bit more comfortably until we have the bigger randomized data from studies done in this country.
Sure, and Dr. Oz, you've been with us over the last couple of weeks where you said this could be a game changer. You're not alone. We're going to play a soundbite with an infectious disease specialist who was on with Laura last night, Dr. Stephen Smith, and he's very optimistic about this as well because, as you said, it was randomized. There was a control group. Here's Dr. Smith last night with Laura. Listen.
No person that has received 5 days or more of the hydroxychloroquine and zithro combination has been intubated. But if the regimen didn't work, why would it just be the people that didn't nearly complete the regimen? Most of the people were in the first 2 days. It's absolute game changer. I think these data go to really support the French data. Now you actually have an intra-cohort comparison saying that this regimen works. I think this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic.
That is an extraordinary soundbite right there. Dr. Oz, you know, we have heard from people who have kind of downplayed this cocktail with the chloroquine and the Z-Pak as well. But this is different in this case, isn't it?
Well, it's different because it's a randomized trial. This is what everyone has been asking for. Now, it's not as large and comprehensive, and it's still not published, but it's important to recognize that these guys have done a little bit of what we're expecting. A couple of points, they actually added antibiotics to all their patients, so both groups got antibiotics. So this is actually showing basically what that infectious disease specialist was pointing out. Let me also offer one more bit of insight. The reason they did this study, because I've spoken to the French surgeon, interviewed him, the French doctor who did the studies in Marseille. He's the one who alerted me to this Chinese work. We contacted the Chinese. They think the mechanism of action is reduction of inflammation, although it does, we believe, help prevent the virus from getting into your cells. So the drug has a mechanism of action. But here's the big part that really caught my attention. This is how astute doctors work. They noticed in their hospital in Wuhan, they had 80 patients admitted with lupus who were taking this medication, hydroxychloroquine. It's a common medication for that condition. None of them had COVID-19.
Wow.
They noticed 190 patients came in with COVID-19. This is early in the course of the disease. None of them had lupus. They thought, what's the difference? Maybe it's his medication. So based on Brian's very astute question yesterday on this show, this goes to the influence you guys have, I actually contacted Seema Verma, who's the incredibly capable, talented head of CMS, Medicare, Medicaid. They've got tens of millions of patients in the database. I asked, would you do what Brian Kilmeade asked, which is to compare patients in our database, national database, who will take hydroxychloroquine, we know from the fact that they fill their prescriptions, and compare them to people who don't. Is there a difference in how often they get the COVID-19 infection? It's a rough and tumble study, but she's agreeing to do it, or look into it anyway. I think it will be fascinating to replicate what the Chinese have done. Just let's do what they've done. Let's not reinvent the wheel. If they think it's good enough for the Chinese people to routinely get, we should at least consider examining it carefully in this country so we don't lose opportunities.
Dr. Oz, I don't get this. Let's reframe this. You ready? So the French say it works. The Chinese say it works. You're getting studies that show it works. You're trying to tell people in New York to test this. You said you were going to. Have you been able to get an answer if they're testing this or not? And do you think perhaps, even though you don't know for sure, politics is playing a role in this? The fact that the president thought he could be optimistic on it, did that actually bring politics into this? And is this cure not moving forward because people don't like the president?
You know, Brian, it's very hard to judge motivation. I can only judge action. And I know that in New York State now, you're not allowed to prescribe this medication to patients. I believe the reason Governor Cuomo did that was to protect patients who have lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, because he was worried folks would hoard the medication. So you take people who definitely benefit, and theoretically benefiting patients will just hoard it. So I don't know motivation. I just know that when you have the federal government saying, as on your show, on the town hall we did on Fox and News last week, the vice president said that the FDA was okay with patients getting this from their doctors. Over the weekend, the FDA passed a ruling saying, okay, it's off-label, but go ahead and do it. And then we're not allowed to prescribe it as physicians in New York, which means members of my staff, friends of mine, I tell them to go get hydroxychloroquine. They cannot get it legally in New York. And I think that's a concern. We should have physicians practicing medicine based on the best data. This will contribute to their knowledge base. It doesn't prove anything definitively, but it's valuable. When I have top-notch doctors coming on and saying, I'm using it. Listen, Ian Lipkin, the famous virus hunter that I mentioned, was on the show with me talking about this. He got COVID-19 last week. And he called all of his friends, including Chinese doctors, and they recommended to him what he ended up doing, which is, as a world expert, he took hydroxychloroquine himself. But that should be allowed in several states in America. That's being blocked. I don't think that's right.
I remember you had a guy on your show that we interviewed as well, and he said I think he was down in Florida, and he said he'd said goodbye to his family already. He took the drug, and within 24 hours, he said he didn't even have any symptoms. It made him feel so much better. So, and I thought we were getting a huge shipment from Israel. So are we going to run out of this drug? Aren't other countries helping us?
Well, I've talked to members of the task force. I mentioned the study of Dr. Birx yesterday when I was interviewing her. And so this is all breaking news for them as well. But we are getting the shipments. The task force is assured me that they're going to get over 100 million pills in. That's enough to treat at least 5 million Americans, which is more than have contracted the illness. But go back 1 second. Brian's question and the observation the Chinese made. They've noticed that people already taking the medication didn't get the illness. So we ought to think about looking at it for doctors and nurses and the loved ones of people who get ill. We actually have a clinical trial at New York Presbyterian, my hospital, to study that exact question. But it's going to take a while to get the answer. But in the meantime, is it worth trying a malaria drug which was designed for chronic use that's widely been used for 65, 70 years?
Of course.
Right. We don't know that this is the solution, but it certainly is optimistic.